Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Oi, good evening. Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome to a very, very special episode of Pat and Christys tonight with me, Martin Daubney. Tonight, we delve into the farmers' protests that have rocked Westminster earlier on today. And plenty of those farmers are with us tonight as part of a very special live studio audience. Welcome to the studio. That's you. Now, today we've seen deep, deep despair.
I don't make any money on the farm. I run the farm because it's in my blood. I run the farm because I've got a son who's 21-year-old who's passionate about farming.
And we're seeing solidarity.
Nigel Farage is here, of course. What an unbelievable turnout, Nigel.
Yeah, and it's just the start.
And magnificently, we're seeing Jeremy Clarkson reaching the end of his tether with the BBC.
So it's not about you, it's not about your farm and the fact that you bought a farm to avoid inheritance tax.
Classic BBC there, classic.
And haven't we all felt like that before? Classic BBC trying to stiff somebody who doesn't agree with them. Now, joining me and our audience for the first hour tonight, we have the Conservative MP Greg Smith, we have the Labour MP Barry Gardiner, and the former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. Welcome to the studio, gentlemen. So fasten your seatbelts for a farm-tastic show. So coming next is the farmers' fury in their own words, but that's right after your headlines with Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Martin. The time is just after 9 o'clock and these are your latest headlines. Farming leaders have accused the Chancellor of refusing to engage with them over controversial changes to inheritance tax. That's as thousands of farmers have marched on Westminster today. First unveiled in Rachel Reeves' budget, the plans to impose inheritance tax on farms worth more than £1 million have sparked fury among rural communities. Speaking at the protests in Westminster, Shadow Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, Victoria Atkins, says the impact on farmers will be huge.
If older members of the family live past March 2026 when this change comes in, then they are faced with an enormous inheritance tax bill when that dear beloved relative passes on. And when I say, huge bills, we're talking hundreds of thousands of pounds, possibly even over £1 million.
Among the thousands of farmers attending the protest today, there have also been many of the future generation hoping to take over their family's farm one day. Earlier, one of the farmer hopefuls told GB News he wants the government to rethink.
It's just important because family farms are what have provided food for England through 2 world wars and up to now. So it's a vital part of our economy. It's a way of life. It's not a job. I've been brought up around farming, and I can't really imagine my life without it. I just want people to listen. I just want the government to hear what we're saying and at least have a look, go back to the drawing board and just see if they can do it better and help more family farms like us.
Meanwhile, Defence Minister Luke Pollard has visited the training centre for Operation Interflex today. The operation is the UK's Armed Forces programme, which has helped train 50,000 Ukrainian troops since Russia's invasion began in 2022. Mr Pollard says that the UK will continue to support Ukraine with programmes like this for as long as it takes.
Well, the situation in Ukraine is very serious. Russian aggression against the Ukrainian people is not only targeting Ukrainian troops on the front line, but targeting energy and critical national infrastructure as winter approaches. There's one person who could stop this war. There's one person who could stop the escalation and could stop the attacks on civilians. That one person is President Putin. At every stage, it is Russia that has escalated. But our support for Ukraine is undimmed. We're doubling down on our support with more military equipment, kit and training going to Ukraine, and we'll continue to do that for as long as it takes.
And finally, following widespread snow and ice today, the UK is preparing for further bad weather over the coming days. A new ice warning has now come into force for much of southern England, the Midlands and eastern Wales, which will remain in place until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's alongside several other warnings for snow and ice issued across the UK. For now, those are your latest GB News headlines. I'm Sophie Reaper, and now it's back to the fabulous Martin Daubney.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Got those well in. That's me doing the most banging there. Now, very, very good evening and welcome once again to tonight's live studio audience. Welcome to the show. Now, around 10,000 farmers, actually, I think the police said 20,000 farmers descended on the capital earlier on today in protest against the Labour government's inheritance tax raid on British farmers. Here's what one of them had to say to us.
Before the election, they came to the NFU conference and promised us they wouldn't put up taxes. They promised they wouldn't put up the inheritance tax, and they lied. And they're now blamed if they don't get this money, they won't have enough money for the National Health Service. And we are here today because we have been betrayed. And my farm has been owned by the same family since 1551. I'm only a caretaker, my generation, and my children and my cousins, they will be caretakers for the next generation. We are here to produce cheap food for this country, and our family survived the First World War. Many of my members fell on the battlefields of Flanders. Our farm was shot up and bombed during the Second World War, having farm workers killed. We're not about to lie down and have our family inheritance stolen from us to waste money on the vanity projects of the Labour Party.
And that is the very, very best of British. And meanwhile, our political editor Christopher Hope spoke to the Prime Minister, who's living La Vida Loca. He's at the G20 summit in Rio de Janeiro, 6,000 miles away, on whether the Labour Party is too urban to truly understand the frustrations of those living and working in the British countryside.
My first job was on a farm.
Okay.
I grew up in the countryside. All of my entire family live in the countryside. We're a rural family. I'm the only one that lives in a city. I do get it, and that's why I'm able to say with confidence that that threshold for a typical case at £3 million is a very high threshold, and therefore the vast majority of farmers will be unaffected. But I also do know that it matters to rural communities that we are investing in their NHS. They rely on it just as much as anybody in a town or city. It matters that their schools are fit for their children, and it matters hugely that there's enough housing for them and their families that's affordable in rural areas.
Well, there you go. So he was the son of a toolmaker. Now it's Starmer, the farmer. Do we believe it? Do you think he gets it? Let's get the thoughts now of my panel. Of course, that's the Conservative MP Greg Smith, Labour MP Barry Gardiner and the former Labour Minister Bill Rammell. Barry Gardiner, I feel duty-bound to start with you as a representative of this government. Jeremy Clarkson said earlier on today, Labour has cocked up. You need to do the right thing and back down. Has he got a point?
No, I don't think so. I think actually the new tax changes are absolutely right. And let me explain why. I don't have a farming constituency, right? I've been a minister in the Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. I've been on the Select Committee for goodness knows how many years. But I think it is doing the right thing, and I'll tell you why. My constituents, if they have a flat in Wembley, right?
Which, by the way, is the least rural constituency in all of Christendom.
Just about. Yeah. A flat in Wembley, let's say they have total assets of 500,000, because a flat in Wembley cost about 450,000. They would pay on that £70,000 inheritance tax. For a farmer to have to pay that £70,000 inheritance tax, they would have capital assets not of 500,000, but a minimum of 1.35 million. And actually, they could have 3.35 million in capital assets before they have to pay 75,000. And that's because of the way in which inheritance tax works and in which the way in which the APR works means that if you're two people inheriting, that could be a farmer and her husband, it could be a brother and a sister inheriting that farm. They can have up to £3 million in assets before they pay any inheritance tax. And even when they do, Martin, as you know, they don't pay 40% inheritance tax like my constituents would have to. They pay 20% inheritance tax. So if you're looking at a fair taxation system, the rest of the country is looking and saying, how come farmers get these tax breaks?
Well, because,
one more thing.
Barry, the key point is the country won't go hungry if a flat in Brent gets hit with inheritance tax.
Absolutely.
The country will go hungry if farms are broken up.
But can I just answer the point? Because the point is this, if you look, and this is work that's been done by the University of Warwickshire at the Centre for Tax Studies there, if you look at all the people who claimed the inheritance tax in the last year, 44%, just 44% of those had at any time in the past 5 years received any income from trading agricultural produce.
Okay,
it's used. All right. It is used as a way of avoiding inheritance tax by people who buy up land.
It might be by some.
Well,
it might be by some.
56%
Barry,
of
I know you could talk until Christmas, but let's bring Greg Smith in for a Conservative perspective on this. Isn't part of the issue here is this slavish adherence to fiscal policy, without understanding, actually, the human impact, the fact a flat in Brent, with the greatest respect, isn't the same as a farm. And that is why the rules were changed to enable farms to stay in families, to protect estates, to protect continuity, to protect food security, and to make sure we don't go hungry.
Look, that's absolutely right. And when I talk to farmers in my constituency, actually, I took Kemi Badenoch to a farm in my constituency last Thursday. They've worked out, it's a 380-acre arable farm in Long Crendon in Buckinghamshire. They've worked out that if they got hit by the full IHT with APR gone, if they borrowed the money to pay it, 40 years to pay it back. We've got to remember that farms operate on tiny margins. We're talking under 1% for many of them. Roger Seed there, he has worked out it would take 40 years to pay back that debt. Or the alternative is to sell about a third of the farm. And if you sell a third of the farm, you don't have a viable business left anymore. The clue is in the question. If you're operating on a 1% margin and you lose a third of your land, your most valuable asset, the literal thing that which you can produce food on, you're done. You're over. There's no future.
Bill Rammell, is it worth it, what the Labour Party has done here? £1.5 billion saved on the winter fuel allowance. Was that worth it? £500 million is going to be raised through this tax. annually from farmers. That's 2 billion quid total. You spent 10 billion quid on pay rises for teachers and NHS workers. Politics is about choices. The backlash has been massive. Was this the wrong choice?
No, I think it was the right choice. And look, you can make a critique of any set of tax changes, but what the budget did deliver was a huge extra level of investment, particularly into the National Health Service. And that's what people voted for.
You can't make out that if you don't tax farmers on inheritance tax, the NHS will stop. We've heard this my entire life.
Martin, you can make that argument about any of the tax changes. The bottom line is government has to raise taxes. Look, I've got the greatest respect for farmers. In my experience, they work damn hard and they make a vital contribution to society. But I would urge them to look at the detail of these changes, because the reaction since the budget has been completely out of kilter with the facts. This is not a set of changes targeted at farmers per se. It's targeted at the very wealthiest farmers and the very wealthiest landowners. A married couple can pass on £3 million without paying a penny of inheritance tax. That is a deal that no one else in society gets.
OK, let's now introduce some of the audience. And we have any farmers, a couple of farmers at the front here. So you've heard what the Labour Party representatives have got to say. There's nothing to worry about. You can get 3 million quid. It's a great idea for farmers. Sir, what's your name? Tell us what's your answer.
I'm Tony Opera and I'm from Banbury.
Yep.
Yeah, it sounds wonderful, doesn't it? You know, yeah, what's the problem? The trouble is that when we have got a very small farm, and
how many acres do you have?
Well, we own probably about 100.
Yeah.
Right. We are 12 miles away from Jeremy Clarkson. Right. In the last, I don't know, 10 years, we've got Soho farmhouse down the road. The property prices around us have just gone through the roof.
Yeah.
Farming hasn't gone up, has it? You know, what we get is still about the same. Machinery's gone up, everything's gone up. So now you've changed this tax, and, you know, and it's not just the land, it's now our machinery and everything that we've all got to pay, which is fair enough. I mean, no farmer minds paying tax if we're actually getting something to pay the tax for.
Can I just...
Yeah, no, you crack on.
Huge respect for what you say, and you're absolutely right that land values, the value of land has just gone through the roof. Now, one of the impacts of this is actually to bring land prices...
More farmers get taxed when they die because suddenly it's gone up in value.
Martin, if you can just let me finish. The point is that, as I pointed out earlier, 56% of the people who are benefiting from the inheritance tax are not farmers. They're people who buy land in order to avoid tax. And what that does is push up the price of land.
Why not
for you guys,
test it and go after that lot and leave these sort of lads alone?
For you guys who are actually trying to farm, and particularly for tenant farmers who can't afford the land that they want to buy.
Which I understand, and I get that. But the trouble is, from our point of view, and we're only a small farm, but I know we're going to be affected by this, right?
What's your estimate of what your farm is worth?
I don't know what it'd be worth. 2 with the buildings and all that. Oh, God, I haven't even gone into the machinery. I haven't even had a chat with a man in a bowler hat yet, because I need to, you know, we want to see if it will settle and just see what we, you know, to go. You're going to be talking 2.5, 3 million. And
are you married?
Yeah.
So you're actually not going to be affected.
I know what you're saying, but wait for this.
Gentlemen,
wait for this. So also, because back in the late 70s, early 80s, my uncle started a contracting business because the farm wasn't big enough to sustain everybody.
Guys, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. We'll come back to this in a minute. I'm sure we have to move on. We will come back to you, but we have to tell you about this. Tomorrow we've got a world exclusive. Donald Trump's son, Eric, talks exclusively to GB News, and my colleague Ben Leo has been in snowy Aberdeen today, speaking to the president-elect's offspring at Donald's famous golf course. He even had a message for UK farmers. Let's take a listen.
We love you and we're sorry. No different than farmers in the US. We love them and we're sorry. They were treated horribly. So oftentimes the farms were taken away. So oftentimes regulation killed their businesses, made it impossible for them to put food on the table. The cost of fuel killed them, absolutely killed them. Inheritance tax, which my father actually eliminated for farmers in the United States. And the true kind of very wholesome farmer who wanted to work the land, their land with their own hands, failed to exist. And it went to some massive conglomerate. And that was not good. for society. And so my father eliminated the inheritance tax as it related to the transfer of agriculture, really. I see what's happening to the farmers over here, and it directly mirrors so much of kind of the strife that so many of the farmers in the United States had for so long. I don't know, a lot of governments have come out to almost be anti-farmer, and I haven't quite figured out why. I mean, it feels like they're some of the greatest people you have in society, right? I mean, there's people that wake up at the crack of dawn, one of the hardest jobs, tough. Any farmer you've ever met. I mean, a real farmer, not like fake farmer, right? Not like, I've got a flat in London and I've got a little tomato bush on the back porch. I'm talking about a real farmer, people who work the land. These are tough, gritty, hardworking people who generally are incredibly patriotic, love family, love God, and just want to work and be left alone.
That's Eric Trump there, sticking up for British farmers. Shame more of our parliamentarians don't do the same. And catch that bombshell interview just weeks after the Donald won the US election tomorrow on Patrick Christys Tonight. This place at 9 p.m, only on GB News tomorrow. Now, still to come, I'll be talking to former MP Khalid Mahmood of Labour to hear more on Labour's defence of their raid on British farmers. And that's next. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Martin Daubney, only on GB News.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Let's talk to Roger Kiska, who is the legal counsel for the Christian Legal Centre. Good morning, Roger. I'm really impressed, actually, by the fact that this school is taking the government to court on this. It's the only way we might get any sort of change. How important is it for these families who find a local religious school to keep their children in there? And are they all billionaires awash with cash?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this is about the fundamental right to educate your children in conformity with your religious beliefs. That's a right guaranteed under the European Convention of Human Rights. And any legislation, primary or secondary, has to be compatible with that convention. And so the basis of our claim is that this is an unfair tax because every country in the EU, first of all, it was by directive that there was no VAT on private education. In the Council of Europe, which is 56 member states, there are no other countries which put VAT on private education. This is an attack on school choice, and this is an attack on honest, hardworking parents who simply want to have their kids educated in a manner which they want them to be raised by themselves. And that, in a democratic nation, should be a given.
Obviously, Labour's logic being, just to provide some balance here, Roger, is that families who send their children to private school can afford the extra 20%, whether they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 children at school. They should be able to afford it, and the schools should be able to absorb some of that cost. And that money will be spent in the state sector. Can you see the logic behind the reasoning?
To be honest, I can't, because not every school is Eton. Not every parent has the means to send their children to private education.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Thank you very much, you too, Kai. Welcome back. This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Martin Daubney, only on GB News. Now, we've heard a whole load of anger and passion from our farmers and from you at home, but now we're going to hear from the other side of the argument. And joining me down the line is the former Labour MP, Khalid Mahmood. Khalid, welcome to the show. Of course, Perry Barr was your constituency. I bet you're glad you're out of it, aren't you, mate? The Labour Party so far has made two big policy announcements, winter fuel announcement, winter fuel allowance, and now the inheritance raid. Both have gone down like a cup of cold sick.
Well, I'm very pleased that we have a Labour government. I'm very pleased that we're trying to sort out the mess the 14 years of Conservatives left us in. I totally agree the fact that what Rachel Reeves has got to do is to fill that huge gaping hole the Conservatives left before the election. And also what we've got to do is support the National Health Service and all the institutions that we need to support. But where I do slightly disagree is that what we've got to do is look at the inflated land prices for farming by taxing, as Barry's just said, those people like Dyson and Clarkson and other institutions, people who've come in purely to avoid tax. We need to get them so we can start to deter people away from buying good farmland. Farming is a national institution. It's a country, as a country, we need food security. It's a very unstable world at the moment. So we need to look at how we can engage with more of our land for farming purposes. So we need to look at the real farmers, the real people.
Khalid, isn't the problem here, is that Jeremy Clarkson said today, is that you've used the Labour Party have used a blunderbuss. They've taken everybody out with this. And he said you should have gone for a sniper rifle, not literally, but as in a targeted approach. If you're after Dyson, if you're after people who are pretending to be farmers by buying a load of land and having a few chickens in the corner, really, they're just rich Londoners who are at the countryside, go for them. Target them, means test them. Same as we saw with the winter fuel allowance, go for the richest pensioners. A lot of them, I've no doubt, wouldn't mind sacrificing their winter fuel allowance for the greater good. But this policy, just like the winter fuel allowance, it gets everybody at the margins and it makes everybody feel like they're being screwed.
Look, I think ultimately we are going to have to sit down and negotiate this. This is not going to be allowed to continue because it's just very disruptive for the whole of the nation. We want to support the farming community to continue producing for us, and that's very important to do. And Barry, and you're just saying it's the same thing again. We need to look at means testing these people and dealing with them so the actual price of land comes down and a lot of people are taken out of this issue.
But the price of land won't come down. Because the price of land won't come down. Why on earth would the price of land come down anywhere in Britain? The country is packed to the rafters. If any small holding comes on the market, you get a massive company hoovering it up. It's for the birds to assume that land's going to get cheaper.
When those people who are using it to avoid tax are taken out of the scenario, we will have more land that we can actually use for food security, and therefore the land prices will come down because everybody knows we do that. And secondly, the other thing I want to say also is that we've got to stop using land for solar energy and also for wind turbines.
Well,
because what we need to do is to use them in our cities. We have a huge amount of roof spaces across all of our cities where we can put solar energy in. I have a guy in Birmingham who's created a new building which totally uses solar energy and produces surplus energy for doing that. So we don't need to take farmland in terms of doing that. So we can stop people selling that bits of land off to ensure that they don't do that. But we do need to look at this in a far better light.
You're out of the Labour Party, but you still sound like you're very much on side with Ed Miliband's policy on solar farms. Thank you very much. That was the former Labour MP. Here we go, the bogeyman Ed Miliband. That was former Labour MP Khalid Mahmood. Thank you very, very much. And let's get back to the audience. A lot of booing was going on there. Who thinks that this idea that it's OK, the land will come back on the market, small farmers will be able to get back into farming because the land's suddenly going to get cheaper because it'll all be affordable. I hear from farmers all the time. Why don't we go to you, sir, on the front row? You're obviously a farmer. You were on my show earlier on. This idea that land will go to farmers cheaply rather than, big landowners, British Airways hoovering up land to plant trees to offset their carbon footprint. Housing estates need to be built. Solar farms, wind farms. Is it a reality to say that this is a good thing for small farmers who want to get into the business because land will suddenly become cheaper?
Yeah, my name's Charlie Harper. I farm on the Northants-Oxfordshire border. A fourth-generation farmer. I think it's a great ideology to think, oh, great, yeah, land will suddenly become a lot cheaper. there's so much money in the city and globally that it's just not the case. It's just going to cripple these small family farms. We farm 400 acres in fourth generation, and it's just going to. It's just everything else that's gone with it. It's since COVID, the price of wheat, for example, is the same now as it was 5 years ago. And agflation, as they call it, which is on machinery, fertiliser, all your inputs has just gone up. It's just gone through the roof, and it just makes it very difficult to have a viable business now. And this is just the final nail in the coffin.
OK, very much. So, sir, on the front row there.
Hi, Alan Cook. Well, I think the big problem here is basically, well, in the family we have 800 acres up in the Lake District. And this is an ideological attack on the rich people, because what has been said is, oh, this is a way the rich can actually invest money to avoid inheritance tax. Well, good on them, because inheritance tax is a vile, ungodly, disgusting tax that most countries don't have, and we need to get rid of. Basically, we're all arguing at the toss over other things, but inheritance tax is the problem. We need to get rid of that, and then actually, we can actually go back to. I know the Labour government want big tech, big agri, big farm.
Okay,
they don't want dissenting voices from.
Thank you, Alan. Anybody else who would like to make a point? Give us the gentleman from pass the microphone on, please, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, this is the worst kind of envy politics. It's treating farmers as though they're wealthy landowners, whereas really, I mean, how many farmers, when they pass on the farm to the next generation, have a monetary gain from the value of the asset of the farm? They don't. They're not wealthy landowners. They are custodians of that land to future generations. And so it's an iniquitous tax. It's absolutely iniquitous. And, to treat them like they're wealthy landowners sitting there like fat cats living off the fat of the land is absolutely outrageous.
Superb, sir. Thank you very much. Now, I'll come to my panel in a minute, but we have to move on. It's the final week of our Christmas giveaway, and we're on the countdown to the big day. Now, you might want a few quid in your back pocket at the moment. You could win £25,025 in tax-free cash, shopping vouchers and GB News Christmas gifts. But you have to hurry up as time is running out. And here's how you could win your Christmas honours here at GB News, delivered in time for your festivities.
There's just 37 days until Christmas, and it's the final week to see how you could enjoy it on us. That's £20,025 in tax-free cash to make 2025 fantastic. £5,000 to spend on gifts for all of the family. £500 in vouchers to buy a slap-up Christmas lunch at your favourite supermarket. And finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. Plus, we're going to get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Nice and lively here with my audience. Now, coming up, we're going to hear more reaction from our audience. They can't stop talking as we have a look at what the Environment Secretary Steve Reed had to say about today's protests. That's next. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me, Martin Dordby, only on GB News.
Good evening. I'm here with your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Lots of cold weather around at the moment, some harsh frosts, also some wintry showers in places too. But why is it unseasonably cold? Well, the low pressure system that brought the last night's heavy rain and snow for some parts has now cleared away towards the east, and that's allowed for us to drag in our air from the north, a cold direction, bringing Arctic air to many places. It is quite a clear air mass though, so for many it's actually going to be dry overnight, the exception being in places exposed to that brisk northerly wind where we will see frequent wintry showers with some snow accumulations building up in places and icy patches too. Because of the clear skies and that northerly wind, temperatures plummeting tonight, a widespread harsh frost. Across parts of Scotland, temperatures last night dropped to -11, and it could be even colder than that this coming night, -12 perhaps in some places with lying snow. First thing tomorrow morning, a harsh frost then across Scotland. Watch out for some icy patches and some lying snow in places, particularly towards the north. A similar story across parts of Northern Ireland, down the eastern side of England and also into parts of Wales. Here there will be some fairly frequent showers, and they could quite readily be falling as sleet or snow, and so some disruption is quite likely as we go through the morning rush hour. Elsewhere and further inland, a lot of dry weather to be had, and it is generally going to stay dry and sunny as we go through tomorrow. But still, in areas exposed to that brisk northerly wind, we will continue to see some showers, and they could penetrate a bit further inland at times. These temperatures are significantly below average for the time of year, and when you factor in some strong winds coming from the north, it is going to feel bitterly cold. As we go into Thursday, there is the potential for some unsettled weather to push into the southwest. Bit of uncertainty, we could see some heavy rain, perhaps even some snow over the higher ground here. Further north, it's a similar day to today really, wintry showers continuing to pile in from the north, otherwise some sunny spells. By Saturday, things are looking very wet and windy indeed. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment. This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory. Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10. Democracy is a funny old thing. And we don't do boring. Not on my watch. I just won't have it. Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it. That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Thank you very, very much. You're too kind. This is Patrick Christys tonight with me. Standing in, I'm Martin Daubney, only on GB News. Now, in the absence of the Prime Minister, who has jetted off to the G20, a sacrificial lamb was rolled out today and thrust forward by the Labour Party, tasked with the unenviable task of defending their decision to hit farmers with fresh taxes. Now, here's a very wide-eyed Environment Secretary, Steve Reed. Take a look at this.
This government's commitment to farming and to farmers is absolute. That's why we've allocated £5 billion to farming in the budget. That's the biggest amount of money in our country's history for sustainable food production. But we have to plug that £22 billion black hole in our public finances, otherwise we can't fix our public services like the broken National Health Service. So it's only right that we've had to ask the wealthiest landowners and the biggest farms to pay their fair share. But I would emphasise only around 500 farms will be affected. The vast majority of farmers will pay no more under the new scheme than they do under the current one.
He's got that Vietnam stare, hasn't he? You know, he didn't want to be. He wants to be anywhere else on the planet, but there, all the authenticity, perhaps, of a hostage video. Greg Smith, do you think that sending somebody out like that, they have to do it, they have to trot out the same old line, but does it wash? Do you think the Labour Party, back to my original point, grasped the magnitude of how badly this has gone down with the farming community and indeed the wider Great British public, who've almost universally swept in support of farmers?
Well, look, Martin, tens of thousands of people don't turn up on Whitehall for no reason. And the crowd there this afternoon was absolutely electric at the same time as all being petrified for the future of their farms and the future of food production in this country. And it just doesn't wash when the Secretary of State or the Farming Minister comes on and says, oh, only very few people will pay it, when actually, if you talk to real farmers, if you listen, if you actually engage with the sector, you actually get the stories from the real farmers who have done the real maths that shows that they might have to sell up to a third of their farm to meet this tax bill. And that, just as I said earlier, makes them completely unviable. And to this point that land prices will go down, I'm sorry, that is just for the birds. We know what happens when farms do have to sell a bit of land. It's not bought by other farmers. It's not bought by young farmers trying to get into the industry. It's bought by property developers and energy companies and the people who are going to literally change the face of the countryside and reduce our food security, reduce our self-sufficiency in this country to a point where we're just going to become entirely reliant on imports.
Is that a fact? There you go. Barry Gardner, is that a fair point? Elon Musk got involved in this debate, saying this feels like full-blown Stalinism. It feels like collectivism taking land back into public ownership by forcing landowners out of business, pricing them out of the market. And there's a lot of farmers we've been speaking to on GB News over these past few weeks saying they fear the farmland is going to be hoovered up for housing estates, for Angela Rayner, for solar farms, for Ed Miliband, and for wind farms, for this great British energy fallacy. A lot of people don't just think that the patchwork of the countryside is being changed. Is this actually a war on farmers in disguise?
Quite the contrary, Martin. Look, let me explain why. This government, as part of the budget, and our farmers, the two farmers here know this, has put the largest investment in sustainable farming that has ever been put, 5 billion over the next 2 years into the Sustainable Farming Initiative. You know what it is, because we've increased the ways in which farmers can access that money from 23 ways under the Conservative government to over 100 under the new regulations. Now, if you'll know that Minette Batters, who used to be the president of the NFU, put out in the Country Life this week, saying that 50% of farmers were earning between 0 and 25,000 a year. What Greg has to answer is, why after 14 years of a Conservative administration is that the income that farmers are getting? OK? Because they've had a bad deal from the government. What we're trying to do with the 5 billion that we're investing in the Sustainable Farming Initiative is to actually make farming profitable. And one of the ways of doing that, patchy what Greg has said, is actually to reduce the price of land because, as we know, 56% of the people
Barry, the
who
farmers
have
on
claimed the inheritance
the farmers
tax,
on the front row here don't look convinced.
Well, I tell you who will be convinced, though, Martin. It's the people watching this who are not farmers. It's the people watching this who are saying, why am I...
The farmers are the ones impacted by the Labour Party's policy. They're the most important people in the entire damned argument.
I'm sorry. They will be saying, why am I paying 40% inheritance tax on 500,000.
Bill Rammer's on the end there, waiting to get a word in edgeways.
20% over 3.35
OK, you made that point. Bill Rammer.
Barry's right, there is an issue of equity. But what really concerns me is there's a gulf of understanding about what is happening. Now, the Treasury has estimated that only 500 farms out of 209,000 will be affected by this. Before people shake their heads, that's been independently verified by the Office for Budget Responsibility and the Institute for Fiscal Studies. Now, if it could be bottomed out that only 500 farms... Hold on. If it could be bottomed, hold on. If it could be bottomed out that only 500 out of 209,000 would be affected, would people in this audience support it?
Why do it at all?
I think they've
because people, they're very wealthy people who need to make a contribution towards our public services, and we need extra money for our hospitals, for our schools, for our local.
The farmers, hang on, Bill. It's all. Listen, hang on. It's all fair and well, for two people from the Labour Party tonight. Say, this is helping farmers. Yep. Farmers well off. They're farmers. They don't agree with you. They're the ones working in the industry. They don't feel that this supports them. Surely their voice counts.
But
let them speak.
Nobody in the audience answers my question. If it could be verified that it's only 500 farms, would you support it?
That's just not the case.
Because 2% of the people who are claiming the inheritance tax at the moment, just 2% of them, right, are raking it in to the tune of they're over 50% of the money that is being given away, and each of those 37 people are getting $3 million each.
Okay, hang on, please. Hang on a sec. What we've got now is a clip of perhaps an unlikely ally for the farmers, and it was Ed Davey, the leader of the Lib Dems. He spoke earlier. Let's take a listen.
Environment. And it's been so incredibly difficult for farming for so long. You've had to face rising energy bills, rising fertiliser bills, feed bills. Then you've had the botched transition from the basic payment scheme. Then you've had trade deals that prevent you from selling your produce into Europe but allow Australian, New Zealand farmers to undercut you here. And that's all before some of the worst weather and flooding in generations. You have had it hard, and this government doesn't seem to realise that.
There we go, the knight in shining armour. Riding in to save farmers is Ed Davey. Back to our two farmers on the front row here. You're shaking your head as if all politicians seem to make noises. You don't seem to think any of them are offering you any solutions.
Nice to see Ed Davey wasn't trying to jump into the Thames or something.
Missing his lycra.
I think that the fact there are probably 20,000 farms there today shows that there are more than 500 people affected by what's happened. I'm sure there's data cherry-picked that supports what you're saying. What it should probably do is probably be looked into, more means tested. So you got to probably discount in that big group people who've got a big house and a few pony paddocks outside in that category. I think that does a big disservice to the people out there working very hard, long hours.
OK, so I'd like to bring in the lady there, please. You've been waiting very patiently. Over to you.
I just really are suspicious of Labour's agenda in total. I mean, it started off with looking after their own, giving the train drivers a huge increase. Then it moved on to children. They've always had a thing about grammar schools, so taxing the children. Then the poor pensioners, and that was because they didn't get their vote. And now it seems to be the farmers and the land, because they want the land themselves to house all the illegal immigrants. Take the land.
OK, well put. OK, we'll have time to react to that after the break. Gentlemen, I know you'd like to get back. Excellent points all round. Thank you. Superb from the audience. Now, coming up, we've heard from the Labour Party, the Tories and the Lib Dems. But if you're wondering what Reform UK think about all of this, well, then you're in luck, because next we'll be joined by the party's business and agriculture spokesman, Rupert Lowe. This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Martin Daubney, only here on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
This is about Pulchronomics, which is the often hidden, often controversial economics of beauty. And there's this guy, he's called, here it says, Aniel Hamamesh, but I think they've missed out the D, so I'm guessing he's Daniel rather than Aniel, which he might be, though. He might be or he might be Anal, for an Anal Hamamesh, maybe. That's his unfortunate name. But basically, he's looked into how ugliness affects people, and it turns out he's discovered that ugly people are less attractive. And that affects them for the rest of their life. Now, where this does get interesting, and it is worrying because, of course, it's going to lead to the ugly rights movement, ugly pride march down some dirty back street. And but I remember hearing about this at the time. People born in the UK between March 3rd and March 9th, 1958, were part of this massive survey that was done, which was finding about what would happen to them later in life, and it went through a number of different factors. But I didn't know this. The teachers were also asked to rate their pupils on attractiveness.
Yeah, it's a bit pedo-y.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know whether that would wash now, but it was bone structure and where they're symmetrical, that kind of thing.
You should probably really have a committee of at least half a dozen teachers. Take a sort of standardised view across the whole... You might get a different point of view from the biology teacher, from the Latin master.
You suggest this to a school, and then we can see if we get it going.
It's interesting, though. I don't know whether you're aware of this, but generally speaking, it is understood within sort of psychological, psychometrics and so on, that IQ is the thing that most closely maps your outcomes, generally speaking. But the idea of beauty is the one that isn't discussed. And there is genuinely a theory that this is actually the great determinant of your life chances.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Guys, thank you very much. Now, welcome back to Patrick Christys tonight with me, Martin Daubney, standing in for Pat, who's enjoying his honeymoon. Now, back on GB News with us, and we've heard from the Labour Party, the Tories and the Lib Dems on the farming uproar that is rocking the entire nation. But now, we're going to hear from Reform UK's business and agriculture spokesman, Rupert Lowe, who joins me now. Rupert, welcome to the show. So we saw Nigel Farage in the mix today. You were there, the reformers were all there. What's your solution to agriculture? What would you do for the great British farmers?
Well, the first question, Martin, is why do we need inheritance tax at all? My opinion is inheritance tax is a death tax. It's levied on money that's already been taxed. And I'm hoping that Elon Musk is going to show us that the biggest root cause of the problem is too much state and not enough individual. And I think by cutting the size of the state, which is what we desperately need to do here, we will obviate the need for all these ridiculous taxes to fund this statist sort of experiment, which is failing. I was there today. I was greeted by some fantastic people. They're all very worried about their businesses, and I don't think it's just the farmers we should be talking about, because I think rattling down the track will be the small businesses who've also been brutally treated by this Labour Party. As somebody said earlier, they've had a go at the pensioners, the schools. They're having a go at small businesses, at the farmers. It's very difficult to understand what they think they're doing. The figures they're peddling in the interview I saw are complete and utter poppycock. They don't talk about or understand how farms work. Farms basically have huge amounts of capital tied up. So it's not just the value of the farm, it's the value of the machinery and the stock and everything else, so that when somebody dies, farmers know the actual value of their estate is not just the value of the land, it's the value of all that capital they've got tied up that produces a very, very low rate of return. And I honestly think these people are cynical enough to think they're going to, in as Elon Musk says, some sort of full commie way, try and break the backbone of Britain, i.e. the nation of shopkeepers that actually relies on continuity.
Rupert, it's easy to have a pop at the opposition, but if you were in power now, the Reform Party were in power, what would you do for British farmers?
Well, ultimately, Martin, the first thing we should do is get rid of inheritance tax, and then people wouldn't have to worry about the future of their business. these people are they are the core of our communities, farmers and small businesses, and we've got to foster them. They are the key to, if you like, the continuity and the security of our entire country. Quite apart from the fact we're an overpopulated island, I can't for the life of me think why Labour would want to put at risk, our food supplies when ultimately, we are not producing enough food to feed ourselves. And, we need the farmers, we need the small businesses, and we need to foster people who are going to, if you like, grow the economy and employ what they have difficulty defining as working people.
OK, Rupert Lowe, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Thank you very much for joining us on the show tonight. That was Reform UK's business and agriculture spokesman, Rupert Lowe. Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Quick thoughts now of my panel. We've got a quick couple of minutes. Conservative MP Greg Smith, let's start with you. So, abolish inheritance tax is something that Rupert Lowe said Reform would do, but Kemi Badenoch said that the Tories would do that earlier on today.
Well, Kemi's been very clear. In fact, since we had no sugarcoating it, the hiding we got in the general election in July, and we've had a total reset, we actually only have one solid locked-in policy, and that is to reverse Labour's changes to the family farm tax, agricultural property relief. Kemi has been absolutely clear on that, and that's locked-in Conservative policy for the next general election. But when we hear some of the other parties, Ed Davey on the stage, all the rhetoric, what do Lib Dems do when they actually get power somewhere? Take Oxfordshire Council. They have this most horrendous assault on local farmers by banning all meat and dairy from all council offices. They can come out with all the rhetoric all they like. We know that Lib Dems are no friends of the farmers.
OK, and I'll go to you, Bill Ramo. Quickly, you've got 2 minutes. You're a fan of inheritance tax. You'd like to tell us why. You might get a boo in this room, but tell us why you think it's a good idea.
Because it was actually the Liberal government in the early part of the last century that said, of course, wealthy people get there by dint of their hard work and their effort, but they get there by society as well, through schooling, through the health service and all the other support services. And it's right above a certain level that society gets a small proportion of that benefit back. And that's why we have, rightly in my view, inheritance tax. But let's come back to these changes. They are going to affect a very small proportion of farmers, and that's the reality.
Right. Well, is that true? Martin, Barry, we've got a quick minute. You have to make it sharpish.
Very briefly on inheritance tax. What the wealthy in this country have done is they've taken their income and they've turned it into capital assets and shielded it from tax. Now, poor people can't do that, because actually they only get their income. They only get enough to live on, most of them. Yeah, absolutely.
We're talking about farmers, Barry. Real hard-working farmers.
These guys have barely got anything to live on. That's what they keep saying.
I'm talking about inheritance tax, right? And the people who then take that income and they then put it into a capital asset, they then shield that from tax. And that's the way the wealthy become wealthier and the poor become poorer. And that's why our society has become increasingly unequal.
OK, gentlemen, we've got a call time. Greg Smith, Bill Ramo, Barry Gardner. Thanks, my audience. That's the end of our first hour. But coming up, I'll bring you today's biggest celebrity reactions to the farmers' protests, including an unlikely alliance of Bev Turner and Andrew Lloyd Webber and a typically tetchy Jeremy Clarkson. We'll also be joined by a brand new panel of pundits alongside our sold-out studio audience, so don't move anywhere. We'll be back soon. Well done, guys. Superb.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. I'm here with your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Lots of cold weather around at the moment, some harsh frosts, also some wintry showers in places too. But why is it unseasonably cold? Well, the low pressure system that brought the last night's heavy rain and snow for some parts has now cleared away towards the east, and that's allowed for us to drag in our air from the north, a cold direction, bringing Arctic air to many places. It is quite a clear air mass though, so for many it's actually going to be dry overnight, the exception being in places exposed to that brisk northerly wind where we will see frequent wintry showers with some snow accumulations building up in places and icy patches too. Because of the clear skies and that northerly wind, temperatures plummeting tonight. A widespread harsh frost across parts of Scotland. Temperatures last night dropped to -11 and it could be even colder than that this coming night, -12 perhaps in some places with lying snow. First thing tomorrow morning, a harsh frost then across Scotland. Watch out for some icy patches and some lying snow in places, particularly towards the north. A similar story across parts of Northern Ireland, down the eastern side of England and also into parts of Wales. Here there will be some fairly frequent showers. They could quite readily be falling as sleet or snow, and so some disruption is quite likely as we go through the morning rush hour. Elsewhere and further inland, a lot of dry weather to be had, and it is generally going to stay dry and sunny as we go through tomorrow. But still, in areas exposed to that brisk northerly wind, we will continue to see some showers, and they could penetrate a bit further inland at times. These temperatures are significantly below average for the time of year, and when you factor in some strong winds coming from the north, it is going to feel bitterly cold. As we go into Thursday, there is the potential for some unsettled weather to push into the southwest. Bit of uncertainty. We could see some heavy rain, perhaps even some snow over the higher ground here. Further north, it's a similar day to today, really. Wintry showers continuing to pile in from the north, otherwise some sunny spells. By Saturday, things are looking very wet and windy indeed. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Weekdays on GB News. Wake up to breakfast every day from 6 a.m. Followed by Britain's newsroom at 9:30. At noon, it's Good Afternoon Britain. Followed by Martin Daubney from 3 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Thank you very much. Too kind now. Good evening and welcome back to a very special edition of Patrick Christys Tonight. With me, standing in for Patrick, I'm Martin Daubney. Patrick is on his honeymoon. Hope you're having a good time. Now, today we delve into the farmers' protests that have rocked Westminster, and plenty of those farmers are with us tonight as part of our exclusive live studio audience, and we're seeing despair.
I don't make any money on the farm. I run the farm because it's in my blood. I run the farm because I've got a son who's 21-year-old who's passionate about farming.
And we've seen solidarity.
Nigel Farage is here, of course. What an unbelievable turnout, Nigel.
Yeah, and it's just the start. And my favourite bit, we've seen Jeremy Clarkson reaching the end of his tether with the BBC.
So it's not about you, it's not about your farm and the fact that you bought a farm to avoid inheritance tax.
Classic BBC there, classic.
Superb stuff. Now, joining me and our audience for the second hour tonight, we have the columnist and the broadcaster, Esther Kraku, and also the political editor at the Daily Express, Sam Lister, and the political commentator, Jonathan Liss. And here's another farming pun for you, because Labour are rapidly finding out that you reap what you sow with the electorate. But before all of that, here's your headlines, and it's Sophie Reaper.
Thank you, Martin, and a very good evening to you. Let's take a look at your latest headlines. Farming leaders have accused the Chancellor of refusing to engage with them over controversial changes to inheritance tax. That's as thousands of farmers have marched on Westminster today. First unveiled in Rachel Reeves' budget, the plans to impose inheritance tax on farms worth more than £1 million have sparked fury among rural communities. However, Environment Secretary Steve Reid says because of the previous government, Labour had no choice.
We have to plug that £22 billion black hole in our public finances, otherwise we can't fix our public services like the broken National Health Service. So it's only right that we've had to ask the wealthiest landowners and the biggest farms to pay their fair share. But I would emphasise only around 500 farms will be affected. The vast majority of farmers will pay no more under the new scheme than they do under the current one.
Meanwhile, speaking at the protests earlier today, TV presenter and farm owner Jeremy Clarkson said Rachel Reeves has used a blunderbuss to hit farmers.
If she'd have wanted to take out the likes of James Dyson and investment bankers and so on, she would have used a sniper's rifle. But she's used a blunderbuss and she's hit all this lot. It was, as I understand it, it was a very rushed last-minute decision. And I think, you know, we all make mistakes in life, and I think it's time for them to say, you know what, we've cocked this one up a bit and back down. That's my view.
Elsewhere, Russia says Ukraine has fired US-supplied long-range missiles into the country for the first time today. The Ministry of Defence in Moscow says Ukraine used the Army tactical missile system in a strike on Russia's Bryansk region this morning. Russia has also said it's changed its nuclear policy as Moscow signals anger over the US missile decision. Speaking earlier, Sir Keir Starmer addressed the G20 in Brazil, telling Putin to get out of Ukraine.
Under my leadership, Britain will never be absent from the world table. We will work with partners across the G20, but one nation stands apart. For the third year running, Putin did not attend this summit. He is the author of his own exile. And on day 1,000 of Russia's illegal war in Ukraine, I say again, end the war, get out of Ukraine.
And in weather, following widespread snow and ice today, the UK is preparing for further bad weather over the coming days. A new ice warning has now come into force for much of southern England, the Midlands and eastern Wales, which will remain in place until 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. That's alongside several other warnings for snow and ice issued across the UK, as the Met Office has issued warnings that vehicles could become stranded, power cuts may occur and rural areas could be cut off. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophie Reaper, but now it's back to Martin Daubney and his lovely studio audience.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
I love it. You reap what you sow with Sophie Reaper. Beautiful. Now, one of the most prominent and recognisable voices backing Britain's farmers recently has been, of course, TV presenter and farm owner Jeremy Clarkson, who spoke at the rally earlier on today.
I beg of the government to be big, to accept that this was rushed through, it wasn't thought out, and it's a mistake. That's the big thing to do, admit it, and back down.
There you go, wonderful stuff. And as you'd expect, he wasn't taking any of the BBC's nonsense earlier on, as poor Victoria Derbyshire found out the whole way. She got both barrels.
Why are you here, Mr. Clarkson?
Well, because I'm here to support farmers.
Right. Are you angry?
It's difficult to be angry on somebody else's behalf. That's like being... Yes, no, I'm not angry on someone else's behalf.
Right. So it's not about you. It's not about your farm and the fact that you bought a farm to avoid inheritance tax.
Classic BBC there. Classic. Oh, yeah. It's not the fact that I bought a farm to avoid inheritance tax. The fact.
Don't you just love to see that sort of stuff? And elsewhere, Nigel Farage pops up to show solidarity with the farming community as well.
Nigel Farage is here, of course. What an unbelievable turnout, Nigel.
Yeah, and it's just the start.
With Bev Turner there from GB News, and the theatrical legend Andrew Lloyd Webber revealed himself as a surprise supporter of Farmers too.
In the longer term, what will happen is they'll all be bought by probably foreigners, outsiders, people who are not buying it for the love of the countryside. They're buying it purely as a long-term investment. Many, many, many people hovering around at the moment, rubbing their hands in glee about all of this.
Who'd have thought Andrew Lloyd Webber talking more sense on farming? It seems the most politicians. So to my panel, could celebrity support help or hinder the farmers' cause in this week? So let's bring in my panel now, and that is Esther Krakow, and it is Sam Lister and Jonathan Liss. Esther, let's start with you. Celebrities, they get involved in politics, didn't really help
in the US.
Didn't help in America, did it? Beyonce, Oprah Winfrey, you know, they soon had their faces rubbed into it. But celebrities are coming out, and you have to say, the Labour Party can't stand the fact that Jeremy Clarkson is, you know, he's a millionaire. He's a public figure, but he's sticking up for the British farmers. I thought he was sensational today. What about you?
I mean, he's also an actual farm owner. I mean, that's the big difference between the celebrities here, or I would say public figures here, and the ones in the US that are talking about Ukraine but can't find it on a map. They actually happen to be invested in what they're talking about. And I think, you know, the unfortunate thing is they seem to know a lot more about what's going on than the actual politicians that are deciding on these things. If you look at the cabinet or the people in government, they only represent urban areas in sort of Manchester, Leeds, London. None of them are actually representing the rural communities that at the last election really helped Keir Starmer win the next general election, that I think are probably going to jettison the party after this really ill-thought-out policy. You know, one of the things that I haven't heard of in this conversation around the inheritance tax is actually Britain's natural flood defences. So, you know, the farmers aren't just growing our food, which is pretty important, I would think. Farmland is also some of the natural flood defences that Britain has against, you know, floods and these sorts of natural disasters. And we don't talk about that. Paving over the countryside and having it being flooded in by land developers actually has a real-world impact on our sense of security when we have more extreme weather conditions. And the Labour government hasn't said anything. They released a statement saying, you know, the Farmers Union are a bunch of, you know, loud lobbyists that are privileged. And it's just, why would you demonise the people growing your food that are also protecting much of the country from extreme weather events? So, you know, clearly they don't know what they're doing. But the unfortunate thing is, compared to places like the Netherlands that actually has these farmers' lobbies that are involved in government, that have political representation that are quite effective, we don't have that. We just have, you know, this Labour government with a massive majority, with student activists that don't know what they're doing.
Look to that. There you go. I've got to say, Esther, I saw more heads, you know, nodding in the audience there from you than from any of the Labour politicians. Sam Lister, obviously, Jeremy Clarkson, a huge public figure with Express readers, very, very popular. And his TV show has, I think these gentlemen on the front row will admit, have been admitting all day, it shows how hard it is, how tough it is, how little money there is in it. Clarkson became an unlikely sort of celebrity backer of farming, and you have to admit he's got that ability to cut through and make people listen. And annoy the BBC as a bonus.
Well, that always helps, doesn't it? I think, look, a lot of people have thrown this accusation at Jeremy Clarkson. Look, you said you bought this farm because you wanted to avoid inheritance tax. Therefore, your argument here is not valid. But actually, he has shown the nation how hard it is. Who else gets up at 5 in to you know, do hard manual work for little money? You do it because you want to pass something on to your families, don't you? And yeah, and you've been brought up in this way. It's part of you. It's not a financial thing, is it? It's a life. It is your life, and it's about family, and it's about passing something on. At the Express, we're running a Save Britain's Family Farms campaign because we do believe this is such an important issue. We're against the inheritance tax anyway because we feel like actually if you there is something fundamentally wrong with taxing people because they want to pass something on to their family. But obviously the farms are a special case on top of that. So we are campaigning to just get this overturned full stop.
Great stuff.
Not for a kind of mitigation. I don't think mitigation is going to help here, is it? We need it to be reversed.
Great stuff. Jonathan, could I bring you in? Why is it that the people on the political left hate celebrities getting involved if they're well off? They can't stand it that Jeremy Clarkson's sticking up for farmers. They can't stand it that Nigel Farage sticks up for Brexiteers. They can't stand when Donald Trump, these people are wealthy, they are self-made, but they seem to have much more of the common touch than the Labour Party do. The farmers here are telling us that the Labour Party seem to be completely and utterly out of touch with their everyday needs.
I don't think that Donald Trump is normally considered to be a man of the people. He's obviously just won he's just won an election, but that doesn't make him some kind of local bloke down the pub. I don't think that people are always voting for that.
What do you reckon about the Rust Belt voted for him?
Look, obviously celebrities will get involved in different campaigns as they see fit. No one is stopping celebrities from joining any cause. I don't think that the left is upset with the fact that there are celebrities joining a cause against the government. I think that people are pointing out, as Victoria Derbyshire did in that interview, that Clarkson has an interest in this. He's literally admitted the fact that he bought that land to avoid inheritance tax, which he will now presumably have to pay. Unless he goes, for example, and gives that land to his children and then lives another 7 years, as is the case for anyone who wants to pass on property before they die. I think that's the root of this. I can see both sides of this argument. I can absolutely sympathise with farmers who feel that that their heirs will have to sell the land when they die and that that's not going to be good for their families or for farming. I can completely understand that. And I can also see the government, first of all, that the argument they make about £3 million being quite a high threshold, and also the fact that it's closing a loophole that people have exploited and that people are simply being asked to pay a tax that other people will have to pay. So if you inherit your parents' property, for example, you'll have to pay inheritance tax on that, for example, and that's the principle at stake.
Everyone's happy. But the point with I think the point with that is that if someone doesn't pay, a farm isn't the same as a house.
A farm is actually productive.
We need food to eat. I want to bring one of the farmers on the front row here, sir. How much has Clarkson helped your cause?
I think that there was a bit of hesitance when he first got involved, but actually he's got a great following and he's opened a lot of people's eyes who aren't from the countryside to see what the challenges are that farmers go through. And he rightly so didn't want to make it about him today. And I'd also like to just sort of congratulate all the farmers out there, possibly 20,000 of them out there, although there's apparently only 500 that are affected by what's happening, which I don't quite believe. I'd just like to sort of congratulate on them that when everyone left, there wasn't any litter there. You wouldn't have known there that been there. You could go down the French route, couldn't you? You could get aggressive and chuck manure everywhere. We don't want to do that. We want to take a good, progressive, positive way of doing it without upsetting everyone like people do, gluing themselves to the road.
Great stuff. We have to move on. Maybe after the break we can talk about should we be a bit more gilet jaune, but that's for later in the show. Now, moving on quickly, it's the final week of our Christmas giveaway and we're on the countdown to the big day. Now, you could win 25 grand and £25 in tax-free cash, shopping vouchers and GB News Christmas gifts. But get your skates on because time is running out. And here's how you could win Christmas honours delivered in time for the festive season.
There's just 37 days until Christmas, and it's the final week to see how you could enjoy it on us. That's £20,025 in tax-free cash to make 2025 fantastic. £5,000 to spend on gifts for all of the family. £500 in vouchers to buy a slap-up Christmas lunch at your favourite supermarket. And finally, a GB News Christmas goodie bag. Plus, we're going to get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2 or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Now, coming up, we're joined by farmer Tess Weldon, who will be directly impacted by the changes to inheritance tax. She goes head-to-head with the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards. I'm sure sparks will fly. That's coming up. If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion. Mark meets at My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
This is reported in the Telegraph today, and it's about being white or being coloured or being anti-racist. Is Monopoly a racist game?
This is an incredible story, actually, I have to say. I'm reading this from the Mail. It's in Telegraph as well, but from the Mail. Children should be playing Monopoly to learn about racial privilege, councils claim. White players should be given more money, spend less time in jail, and also be given a head start on buying property to convey inequality and white supremacy. And this all, I'm not making this up, and this all comes from a document called How to Raise Anti-Racist Children, which was drawn up for the Barbie manufacturer Mattel in 2020, and it's been endorsed, or at least circulated, by Leicestershire County Council, Southampton City Council, Lambeth London Borough and the City of London Corporation, who apparently think this is a sensible way to go forward. I mean, for goodness sake, Monopoly is just a bit of fun, isn't it? Let's just enjoy it.
It's a wonderful example of how anti-racist thinking becomes racist. What they're saying is that white children should be given privileges on the Monopoly board.
Because they've got it in real life.
So that they learn that they already have privilege. Do we really think children are going to think that? Or do we really think children are going to think, oh, great, I have an white children are going to think, great, I have an advantage?
They're going to think, oh, no, I've landed on Mayfair and there's 4 houses there.
It's wonderfully stupid.
We've also heard it with nursery rhymes as well, though, haven't we? And mums and dads being told not to sing Bar Bar Black Sheep.
That's in the story as well, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's steeped in white culture. And what a lot of nonsense that is as well.
What are you meant to sing instead?
Well, Bar Bar, I don't know, White Sheep, perhaps, I don't know.
Or rainbow sheep or something.
Wah Wah White Sheep. You can say Wah Wah White Sheep as they play Monopoly with their privileges.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the show. Now, farmer and political consultant Tess Weldon will be directly impacted by the changes to inheritance tax and is fearful of what Labour's proposals will mean for her future. Meanwhile, the former editor of Labour List, Peter Edwards, believes the new taxes won't hit ordinary people. Let's see who comes out on top tonight. Tess, explain, please, your situation.
Well, I have a family farm and my father passed away last year, and I have, obviously lots of people come with families with siblings, and I'm the only sibling that's interested in taking over the farm. And I'm already facing having to buy my siblings out of the farm. But if you factor in the new inheritance tax, there is just no way that I can continue farming. And it's not just me. There are people in my community that are facing the same thing. And I've talked to a lot of older farmers who feel that it is, they are considering committing suicide before this bill comes through because they are so scared that people will not be able to inherit, and a farm that they've had for generations will be lost, and it will be turned into houses, and their communities will be destroyed. They almost feel like it's their duty. And considering that Labour's pushing an assisted suicide bill on Friday, you wonder how much of this is planned.
Peter Edwards, it's not the first time I've heard that. We've had farmers coming on my show in the daytime saying there have been suicides. I had a French politician on yesterday saying this is increasingly happening on the continent too. There are consequences to these tax regime changes, and we are seeing these tragic events pan out. Is that a price worth paying?
Firstly, I'm really sorry to hear of Tess's bereavement.
Is death a price worth paying? I think that's a shocking thing to even suggest. It's a shocking thing to try and put the economy on.
Peter, over to you.
Yeah, firstly, I'm really sorry to hear of Tess's bereavement, and obviously life and death, which affects us all, goes above and beyond party politics and public finances. Tess is right to raise the issue of mental health, particularly in rural communities, because we know farmers work very hard. They don't necessarily get to switch off like an office worker at 5 or 6 p.m. They live with a lot of worry. If it's a family farm, they feel quite understandably responsibility to their forebears and the next generation. There's a lot of loneliness in the countryside. So I think we have to take these things very seriously. But on the policy, I do support it, and I take very seriously everything Tess has said for the human cost as well as the farming cost. My understanding is about 500 farms will be affected, and that's only when you begin to pay tax over £3 million of assets, and the rate of IHT inheritance tax we paid will be lower than you or I would pay, Martin, as non-farmers on our estates.
Okay,
so there is still a discount.
Peter, the 500 farmers thing is something we've heard for days and days and days now. The farmers in the audience here don't agree with that. Tess, you also rolled your eyes there. What's your take on this? 500, we keep hearing it's many, many, many more than that. Tess?
I certainly think it's more than that. If it were only 500 farmers, then there'd only be 500 farmers on Whitehall today. But there were thousands of us. And the mainstream media are playing down how many of us there were because they don't want to see that it's a big thing. In fact, the NFU are in cahoots with the government and trying to tell us not to turn out. What a thing for someone's union to go and tell them not to protest. But there are far more of us that will be affected because the average farm is about 217 acres last year. And 40 acres plus a farmhouse that is apparently commensurate to farm those acres is worth £1 million now. So almost every farm will be affected by this. And every farmer is going over and looking at their books and thinking farming is not going to be sustainable in the future unless Labour roll it back. And we've not just been impacted by Labour, we've been impacted by the Conservatives before Labour. We've been squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. We have hardly any margins. They've introduced things like nitrate vulnerable zones. We literally have to count how much manure is coming out of our animals. And then we pay tax on it. It's absurd. And the paperwork is killing us. We should be allowed to farm and protect the land that we've protected for generations so that Britain looks the same as it did in the time of Emily Bronte. And we have the beautiful landscape that inspired poetry and novels and all the other things in British culture that we just can't do without. We cannot become a sea of suburbia houses, people coming in from abroad, being put in these houses by Labour, being given public service jobs, and then they will rely on Labour getting back in order to keep their jobs. Labour will create a client state. And that's why Labour's really dangerous. Labour's not just a political party, they are a movement, and that's why we should always be afraid of a socialist government.
Peter Edwards, final word to you. There has been a lot of word about this being like a broader war on farmers with a view to seize the land back, to take it into state ownership, to do precisely the kind of things Tess is talking about, housing estates, solar farms, wind farms. Is that true?
No, and it's completely legitimate for Tess or anyone to oppose a policy on grounds of ideology or belief. But to pick up on what Tess was saying, the National Farmers Union are not in cahoots with the Labour government. They're actually one of its biggest critics, and one of its biggest critics between 1997 and 2010. It's not the mainstream media producing stats, I'm afraid. It's the Treasury producing stats, impartial civil servants, And do we live now in the era of Emily Bronte and Charlotte Bronte? You know, I've read many of those novels, and I don't think we do. But at the other end of the spectrum, is there a plan to concrete over the countryside? No, because Labour's housing policy is about grey built and not touching the green built.
Okay, thank you very much to Peter Edwards and also to Tess Weldon for that debate in the studio. Magnificent stuff. And let's bring in my audience now for some reaction. Who'd like to speak up? Sir, we like to stand up. We have a microphone there. What's your point?
Yes, thank you kindly. I wanted to ask a question. First of all, my name is Christopher Greena. I am a university student studying international relations, third year. And my question to you is, how do you think, hypothetically, Donald Trump would tackle this type of situation? Well, by that I mean connected to farming, of course, in his country, United States of America. The main reason I ask is because, well, first, I'm curious, and second, I study international relations.
Excellent question. Thank you very much.
Thank you kindly.
Why don't you have a go answering that? I think he'd be strong. He'd be America first. He'd protect his agricultural industry. He'd subsidise them. He'd protect land, and he'd make sure that the American market wasn't flooded with cheap imports, which would bankrupt American farmers. And actually, wasn't that the point of Brexit? We were meant to take back control of our land, and Macron, meanwhile, is in the Rio de Janeiro summit as well, not defending French farmers. Tess, over to you. What do you think Trump would do? Do you want someone like that in control of British agricultural policy?
Frankly, someone who's willing to get the government out of our business is exactly the kind of person that we'd want in agricultural policy. Squeezing DEFRA so it's as small as possible, squeezing the state so it is as small as possible, because Whitehall doesn't understand anything about farming. They've not been there, they've not lived it, they've not done long nights of lambing, they've not pulled out a calf and seen that it's dead and been devastated.
Tess, the debate's over now, you can look at me.
All right.
Peter's gone. Peter's gone. You'll be delighted to. But on a serious point, it was only back in March when the tractors were going around Parliament Square complaining about the Conservatives. It was the same stuff then. It was red tape. It was net zero. It was high petrol costs. All of those things haven't gone away. What we're seeing today is just the addition of the inheritance tax whammy. So, what kind of politician would you like in Britain?
I think a politician that appreciates that farmers know how to farm their land. But more than that, it's not just about politicians. And I'm going to address something that I've heard murmurings about, and I've certainly spoken to farmers privately about. And we're not particularly happy saying in public, because we don't really want to complain. You know, the farmers in the audience, we don't want to complain, folks, do we? We're very happy to be out in the snow, the sleet, the rain, the boiling heat, because we just get on with it. That's how we're bred, how we're built. But the NFU has not been supporting us. For years, policy towards farmers has gotten harsher and harsher. And the NFU is tacitly supporting a net zero agenda. Politicians are supporting a net zero agenda and telling farmers that it's their fault rather than telling corporations to, you know, maybe cut emissions. And
Tess, maybe we could bring one of the lads on the front row here, because we're hearing a lot about maybe a new movement, something perhaps a
farmers' union.
A farmers' union that's a bit more, dare I say it, a bit more fruity. Are we at that point where playing Queensberry rules doesn't seem to be working?
Well, as you've seen today, we've been very fair, and we'll see.
But will that work?
Well, as you say, we'll see. And as Tess says, that we've been working in all these harsh conditions when, for example, in COVID, the shelves were empty. People were happy sitting at home picking up their payments from the government and probably saving money at the same time when farmers weren't doing that. They were out, they were grafting, nothing changed. They had to get out in the elements and try and put food on the shelves because we couldn't get everything. We couldn't get the imports that we want. And it was only 2 years ago. Everyone's got short memories, I think.
Do you think, audience, that's what it's going to take? We need to see empty shelves again. We need to see an actual impact where people suddenly, hey, there's no food on the shelves. We need farmers after all. Do we need to go that way, or would that make you not support the farmers? What do you reckon?
Oh, no, support the farmers, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, support them, support the fishermen, the farmers.
Go on.
But
I was just going to make a point that when we talk about this dispute about the figures, so we had 20,000 farmers out there today, and we have the Labour Party saying that it's only going to affect 500 farms. When you look at pre-election, when Ed Miliband was going to save us £300 a year on our energy bills, all of the plans they had were fully funded and fully costed. And then all of a sudden they found this black hole that they didn't know about. So when you're talking about true figures and who's telling lies, who do you believe?
Well, can I make a point on that? The OBR cannot actually substantiate the 22 million black hole. They can't find it. It doesn't exist.
Well, they found more black holes than Stephen Hawking, but we have to leave it there. Tess Weldon, a wonderful audience. Thank you very, very much. Excellent, thank you. Now, still to come, I'll be bringing you all of tomorrow's front pages, hot off the press with my panel. Plus, it's not just the farmers suffering under Labour's hard-hitting budget. Pensioners, of course, have been hit by a nasty revelation. I'll tell you more after the break. This is Patrick Christys tonight with me, Martin Dordney, only here on GB News. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm here with your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Lots of cold weather around at the moment, some harsh frosts, also some wintry showers in places too. But why is it unseasonably cold? Well, the low pressure system that brought the last night's heavy rain and snow for some parts has now cleared away towards the east, and that's allowed for us to drag in our air from the north, a cold direction, bringing Arctic air to many places. It is quite a clear air mass though, so for many it's actually going to be dry overnight, the exception being in places exposed to that brisk northerly wind where we will see frequent wintry showers with some snow accumulations building up in places and icy patches too. Because of the clear skies and that northerly wind, temperatures plummeting tonight, a widespread harsh frost. Across parts of Scotland, temperatures last night dropped to -11, and it could be even colder than that this coming night, -12 perhaps in some places with lying snow. First thing tomorrow morning, a harsh frost then across Scotland. Watch out for some icy patches and some lying snow in places, particularly towards the north. A similar story across parts of Northern Ireland, down the eastern side of England and also into parts of Wales. Here there will be some fairly frequent showers, and they could quite readily be falling as sleet or snow, and so some disruption is quite likely as we go through the morning rush hour. Elsewhere and further inland, a lot of dry weather to be had, and it is generally going to stay dry and sunny as we go through tomorrow. But still, in areas exposed to that brisk northerly wind, we will continue to see some showers, and they could penetrate a bit further inland at times. These temperatures are significantly below average for the time of year, and when you factor in some strong winds coming from the north, it is going to feel bitterly cold. As we go into Thursday, there is the potential for some unsettled weather to push into the southwest. Bit of uncertainty, we could see some heavy rain, perhaps even some snow over the higher ground here. Further north, it's a similar day to today really, wintry showers continuing to pile in from the north, otherwise some sunny spells. By Saturday, things are looking very wet and windy indeed. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is the nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. Then catch me, Martin Dordney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akweer, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Thank you very, very much. Now, we're going through the front pages now with my panel. Let's get the front pages up on the screen. First off there, we have the Metro, and it's got the very original headline, Farmageddon. Next up, we have the Daily Mail, and that has the farmers again. The day Clarkson's farmer army park their tractors on Starmer's lawn. And below that, very rudely interrupting our farmer strike, Vladimir Putin clears the way for nuclear strikes. Next up, we have The Guardian. They're also talking about the farmers there. They've got a wonderful picture there of toddlers on tractors. I thought that was a really, really amazing image earlier on of kids. Of course, these are farmers' kids who would like to carry on farming. Are they being pulled away from that opportunity? Talking of which, an excellent front page next from The Express. Wonderful image there. Look at that picture. It says there's a young girl there. When I grow up, I wanted to be a farmer. If we don't have a next generation, there'll be no future for farming. It is the backbone of this country. Without it, we cannot survive. A wonderful front page there from The Express. Now moving on to the Daily Telegraph. Again, the man of the moment, Jeremy Clarkson there, being mobbed by his fans. Headline there, the Prime Minister claims the BBC has backed him over the farm road. Isn't that funny? The BBC on the same side as the government. That's precisely what Jeremy Clarkson was banging on about earlier on. And moving on to the Eye. This is a fantastic story here. Well, it's not, it's terrible, but it's something else we should be really talking about. An extra 100,000 pensioners in poverty after the winter fuel cut. And we'll touch on that story later in the show. And, of course, today, where the mercury really plummeted, there's a twin whammy today of the winter fuel crisis suddenly coming home to roost at the same time as that winter fuel, as the farmers protest in Westminster. Now, let's bring in my panel, of course, Esther Krakow, Sam Lister and Jonathan Liss. Let's talk, if we can, because, Sam, you're the Associate Editor now at The Express, and I do think, genuinely, not just because you're here, it is a wonderful front page. It's got a young girl there. When I grew up, I wanted to be a farmer, and something that's so, so important. I had a young lad on my show earlier on today, a guy called Henry Bailey, a 12-year-old, and I said to him, if you could ask the Prime Minister a single question, what would you ask? And he said, I'd like to ask him why he hasn't thought this through. I wanted to follow in my dad's footsteps. We got that question to the Prime Minister today in Rio de Janeiro. We put a 12-year-old in contact with the Prime Minister, and your front page here just echoes this feeling of children, the backbone of farming, who want to carry on, and this policy, Sam, could prevent them from being able to do so.
Yeah, well, look, what is this protest all about today? Why are you all here? It's about the kids, isn't it? You know, you're not here because you're trying to cling on to money or land. It's about passing it on to children, and that's what we wanted to illustrate on that front page. I think one of the things that really struck me today, though, was Victoria Atkins, the Shadow Environment Secretary. She was talking about a story, somebody she'd talked to who said, look, my father has now said to me, is it better if I pass away before next April? Because obviously, it's this, otherwise you have to go down the 7-year route, don't you? And you've got to live. Obviously, he's of a certain age. And let's be clear about what that means. That is a man talking about taking his own life so he can pass on his farm. And I just think that really, let's be very clear what we're talking about here. This is people who are so distraught that they're contemplating these drastic measures because they want to pass it on to the kids. And I think that's what we were trying to really hit home there on that front page.
It's an excellent image. It really does hammer it home. Yeah, whatever it's doing, great front page. Now, Jonathan, could I attract your attention? You've got it in your hand there, the Daily Telegraph, and it made our audience groan here. The Prime Minister claims that the BBC has backed him over farm raid.
I think it's a slightly inflammatory headline, Martin. Starmer says that the BBC has verified his claim about the number of farms that will be affected, according to the BBC.
Because the BBC never gets anything wrong.
Look, it's not saying he's not saying the BBC agrees with him or the BBC is pro-government. That would be a misrepresentation of what the Prime Minister said.
But it would be fair to point out, Esther, and Jeremy Clarkson mentioned this today, Victoria Derbyshire, it felt like to me, she was parroting the BBC line and she was using Clarkson, weaponising his situation to go in and do Keir Starmer's bidding for him. Am I being biased, or,
well, I mean,
or the BBC on the side?
That was an example of certainly poor journalism, and I think to treat the BBC like an infallible source is mistaken. This is the same BBC that refused to call Hamas a terrorist group, even though they're a denoted terrorist group by the British government. So I don't necessarily see that as the benchmark. But I think the wider thing that I've noticed is, which is concerning, this alongside sort of VAT on public schools, or removing the fuel fuel allowance for pensioners. They're expending all of this political capital on things that are, like, between them, likely to bring in less than £2 billion in total. I mean, this inheritance tax on farms is estimated to bring in £500 million maximum.
It's chicken feed.
Well, exactly.
I mean, in the grand scheme.
The public school, the VAT on public schools, that's estimated to bring £1.7 billion before it actually costs the government more than to keep it in place. The winter fuel payments, £1.2 billion. I mean, if they're really that concerned, they could literally just stop housing asylum seekers in hotels overnight, and that would solve that problem. So I'm just... What is the point of expending all of this political capital and annoying various swathes of society to really what end? I just don't see it. And it looks like student activism, because these are not people that are concerned with a positive trajectory of the country. Okay. And you can really see that I don't really think the country is going to be in good hands 4 years from now.
OK, so let's move on now to another topic caught our eye, the front of the eye, and it's also the front of the Telegraph, because, of course, it's not just farmers that are feeling the heavy weight crushing down on them by this Labour budget, because the government have admitted that up to 100,000 pensioners will be pushed into poverty as a result of the universal winter fuel payments being axed. And this was revealed in an impact assessment conducted by the Department of Work and Pensions. However, no figures were published by the government about the impact this would have had at the time that the cut was first announced back in July. And Sam Lister, isn't that the point? Yeah. You know, all of these things weren't mentioned in the manifesto, and damn sure as mustard, I reckon if they had been, then perhaps the Labour Party might not have even got into power.
Yeah, which is clearly why they didn't mention it. You know, they did it for a reason. They wanted to win. But obviously they got in by misleading people. And I think the point is they didn't release this impact assessment when MPs were voting on these measures. What's the point in releasing them now? I don't get it. They should have done it at the time. Now, the problem is they've got Labour in Scotland are now against this. All the charities are against this. All the parties, Reform, the Conservatives, the Green Party, the Lib Dems. Have you ever known all those parties come together over anything? Never. And I think, you know, the problem is they won't U-turn on this. They won't U-turn on inheritance tax. But it's going to mean they've got a deeply unpopular government for the next 4 years, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. And I think it's a very sad state of affairs.
Jonathan List, could I put the point to you that a lot of people are saying, was it worth it? Was it worth £1.5 billion taking on the pensioners? Was it worth £500 million a year in tax receipts taking on the farmers? That's £2 billion. That's a fifth of what the Labour Party gave to teachers and NHS workers in a public sector pay bonanza.
Which was all clawed back by taxes, by the way, because they pushed them into a higher tax brand.
Politics is about choices, and the Labour Party seem to have made a choice to go after pensioners and farmers. Is that really the right thing to have done?
I don't think the two are the same. I think that they were wrong to axe the winter fuel payments. I think that was a big political blunder. It was done at the wrong time for the wrong reasons, and then it sort of became a totem that they kind of had to see through, because it then became a test of political credibility, which is the worst way to implement policy. So I think that was a real mistake, and I would have liked them to kind of reverse it at the time, but they kind of they thought they had to kind of go there. So what I would hope is that they would kind of piecemeal sort of re-implement it, reinstate it, to kind of save some face over the next couple of years. I think the farmers thing is slightly different because, as I said before, there is obviously a huge and legitimate concern in farmers about the effect this will have on their individual farms, although obviously we can argue about the number of farms that'll be affected. But in principle, closing a tax loophole that anyone else would have to pay is not bad policy, particularly when you do have people who have bought farmland so as to avoid this particular tax. So I think that the public will, they might be in favour, they might have sympathy for the farmers, but I don't think they'll be anywhere near the level of anger in the general public that there was about the winter fuel tax.
Are you joking?
I don't think it's a tax loophole.
I mean, like Britain's food security, just to put it into context, is about 62%. And of that, vegetables, fruits and vegetables, is at its lowest it's ever been, at about 52%. The same government that bangs on about using our public taxpayer money to invest in really experimental green technology is also happy for us to import our fruits and vegetables and a lot of our produce from other countries, which actually has a higher carbon footprint. Everyone is losing.
OK, we have to leave it there. Esther, Sam and Jonathan. And once again, you're getting a lot of heads nodding in the audience. Fantastic stuff. Now, tomorrow, a world exclusive, because Donald Trump's son, Eric, talks exclusively to GB News. My colleague Ben Leo has been in snowy Aberdeen today, speaking to the President-elect's offspring at Donald's magnificent, famous golf course. He even had a message for UK farmers. Let's take a listen.
We love you and we're sorry. No different than farmers in the US. We love them and we're sorry. They were treated horribly. So oftentimes the farms were taken away. So oftentimes regulation killed their businesses, made it impossible for them to put food on the table. The cost of fuel killed them, absolutely killed them. Inheritance tax, which my father actually eliminated for farmers in the United States. And the true kind of very wholesome farmer who wanted to work the land, their land with their own hands, failed to exist. And it went to some massive conglomerate. And that was not good for society. And so my father eliminated the inheritance tax as it related to the transfer of agriculture, really. I see what's happening to the farmers over here, and it directly mirrors so much of kind of the strife that so many of the farmers in the United States had for so long. I don't know, a lot of governments have come out to almost be anti-farmer, and I haven't quite figured out why. I mean, it feels like they're some of the greatest people you have in society, right? I mean, there's people that wake up at the crack of dawn, one of the hardest jobs, tough. Any farmer you've ever met. I mean, a real farmer, not like fake farmer, right? Not like, you know, I've got a flat in London and I've got a little tomato bush on the back porch. I'm talking about real farmer, people who work the land. These are tough, gritty, hardworking people who generally are incredibly patriotic, love family, love God, and just want to work and be left alone.
Yeah. Now you catch that bombshell interview just weeks after the Donald won the US election tomorrow on Patrick Christys Tonight at 9 p.m. Of course, exclusively only here on GB News. Now, coming up, I will bring you the rest of tomorrow's front pages with my panel. This is Patrick Christys Tonight with me standing in. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News.
Britain's Newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
This is one of those angles, really. There's going to be so many different sort of tentacles which go from Donald Trump winning, and where this leads for the royal family. Where's it going to lead for Harry?
Well, put it this way, Harry's just bought a house in Portugal, and it might come in pretty handy in the next few months, because Donald Trump has said in the past that he wouldn't protect Harry, that he would be on his own, and that if it was down to me, this is Donald Trump, if it was down to me, he wouldn't have any protection. And the Heritage Foundation tried to expose his form, and in the end, he was protected, and a judge ruled that the form would never be revealed. I just wonder whether now Trump is in power, I'm not saying it's top of his priority list, but eventually that form might be exposed.
And just so to remind viewers and listeners, Charlotte, in his book Spare, in which he, of course, dumped tons of abuse on his own family, Harry admitted to taking illegal drugs such as cocaine.
Yes, and there have been, you know, I better not name her, but there's been a certain supermodel who has been exposed for taking cocaine. She couldn't go into America for 10 years. It doesn't matter how famous you are, you can't take drugs and go into America. They're very strict on this. So if Harry didn't tick that box, and then he wrote in Spare that he's taken magic mushrooms, marijuana and cocaine, it wasn't a very clever move.
Oh, the implications, though, of Donald Trump saying that Harry can't live in America, like the political ramifications of that. I can't see Starmer handling that very well.
No, and what he just might say, he wants people in America who've told the truth about drug taking, and he's got zero tolerance on illegal drug taking, Trump.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back to the show now. Let's have a quick blast. Thank you, too kind. A quick blast through the final of the first editions of the papers out tonight. And we're starting with The Independent. That man, Jeremy Clarkson, there, front and centre, leading that farmers' revolt. And Ukraine fires first US-made missiles at Russian targets. Of course, hugely controversial, one of the final acts of Joe Biden as he hands over to Donald Trump. Moving on to the Daily Mirror. And again, it's Putin's nuke threats. Ukraine crisis deepens. And moving on to the Times. Again, that's that huge crowd there of farmers at Whitehall today, at the Cenotaph there. 20,000 was the figure I heard, although a lot of the boys in the audience here think it might have been many, many more than that. Isn't it amazing now? It's always a million. They've got a pro-EU march. But if it's something like this, they always downgrade the numbers. Call me paranoid. There we go. And finally, we have the soar-away sun. Jeremy Clarkson is in that top corner in his beanie hat. But the story that probably don't we care about this, Jermaine Jennis's wife breaks her silence. Of course, Gina Speggy, of course, that is the shamed BBC pundit. It's been tough, she says, but I'm focusing on our kids. It puts it all in perspective. Her pain is real. Never mind the pensioners, never mind the farmers. I'm being a grizzled cynic. Let's get back to my panel. So what do we want to talk about? Esther, I'll let you choose. What do you want to talk about in this final blast of the show? Pensioners?
I think pensioners. I mean, I despair this winter for our pensioners, and I just think it's probably one of the cruelest policies I can imagine, because literally no one is winning anything. The argument is to save £1.2 billion, and yet you have people that are coming across illegally on boats that can get accommodation and an allowance that's costing the country over 3 times that amount of money. I just don't think it gets worse than that, seriously.
Yeah, and Jonathan, Liz, I want to bring you in. I mean, I think you were making a good case there for the Labour Party doing a U-turn on this. They probably won't. They're in that corner now. They're probably going to stick by their guns. But let's not forget, back in 2017, the Labour Party's own figures said 4,000 people would die, 4,000 pensioners would die if the winter fuel allowance was brought in by the Conservatives. It didn't happen under the Conservatives, but yet they still went ahead and did it. Is 4,000 deaths, do you think, a price that the Labour Party is willing to pay for saving 1.4 billion quid?
No, of course not. I think that, like the farm issue, there is a kernel of a problem which the government was trying to tackle and inadvertently has upset a lot of people that it probably didn't want to upset, because there are very wealthy pensioners in this country who do not need a few £100s in the winter fuel payments when there are other people who are genuinely struggling. By their own admission, a lot of pensioners came and said, I don't need this payment. The problem is that there are a lot of people who are missing out who do need it. So there are better ways of adjusting that. And in the same way that the government had a worthy ambition with this, which is to stop people like James Dyson from buying up farmland in order to not avoid inheritance tax.
OK, we've got a final minute left. Let's give that to Sam Lister. Have the Labour Party bitten off more than they can chew, taking on the farmers and the pensioners?
I think so, but just quickly on Jonathan's point, there's 250,000 pensioners who pay higher rate income tax, right? That's how many we're talking about. There are 12 million pensioners.
Yeah, and that would have been a fair.
So 250,000. This is the problem you're dealing with. And again, it's like on the farmers. It's sledgehammer to crack a nut, because 250,000 pensioners out of 12 million, and then on the inheritance tax, they're doing it to target people who've bought land, like James Dyson, for example. That's a very small number of people. You know, why are they going after large...
I agree. I think there are questions about...
I'm afraid we've simply ran out of time. Last orders. Thank you very much, Esther Krakow, Sam Lister, Jonathan Liss, and, of course, to our fabulous audience. Thank you, and all farmers made it out today. Thank you very, very much. I'll be back tomorrow from 3 p.m. But next, it's Headliners. That's right after your weather. Fantastic evening, and thanks again to all of you in the audience. Fabulous. Thank you. Cheers.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. I'm here with your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. Lots of cold weather around at the moment, some harsh frosts, also some wintry showers in places too. But why is it unseasonably cold? Well, the low pressure system that brought the last night's heavy rain and snow for some parts has now cleared away towards the east, and that's allowed for us to drag in our air from the north, a cold direction, bringing Arctic air to many places. It is quite a clear air mass though, so for many it's actually going to be dry overnight, the exception being in places exposed to that brisk northerly wind where we will see frequent wintry showers with some snow accumulations building up in places and icy patches too. Because of the clear skies and that northerly wind, temperatures plummeting tonight. A widespread harsh frost across parts of Scotland. Temperatures last night dropped to -11, and it could be even colder than that this coming night, -12 perhaps in some places with lying snow. First thing tomorrow morning, a harsh frost then across Scotland. Watch out for some icy patches and some lying snow in places, particularly towards the north. A similar story across parts of Northern Ireland, down the eastern side of England, and also into parts of Wales. Here there will be some fairly frequent showers. They could quite readily be falling as sleet or snow, and so some disruption is quite likely as we go through the morning rush hour. Elsewhere and further inland, a lot of dry weather to be had, and it is generally going to stay dry and sunny as we go through tomorrow. But still, in areas exposed to that brisk northerly wind, we will continue to see some showers, and they could penetrate a bit further inland at times. These temperatures are significantly below average for the time of year, and when you factor in some strong winds coming from the north, it is going to feel bitterly cold. As we go into Thursday, there is the potential for some unsettled weather to push into the southwest. Bit of uncertainty. We could see some heavy rain, perhaps even some snow over the higher ground here. Further north, it's a similar day to today, really. Wintry showers continuing to pile in from the north, otherwise some sunny spells. By Saturday, things are looking very wet and windy indeed. I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is the final week to grab your chance to win Christmas on Us this year. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
We shot with the London Eye in the background, so it's quite an iconic shoot to do my cover of the Playboy magazine. So,
and you moved into the mansion for a while. Hugh called you the British Carmen Electra. You were one of his favourites, and it's renowned for its parties, of course. Over there, you must have had a few of those. Must have been wild times.
Fantastic parties, yeah. I mean, I met some incredible people. I will forever respect him and everyone at Playboy for the love and the support.
And you were on giant billboards, you were modelling for Nike, for Reebok, you're earning thousands of pounds a day.
Well,
absolutely like living the